do you write?
How do I write?
Yes.
You think I'm going to tell you how I write? Okay, no, I'm not. So that would allow me to introduce the notion of the Lindy effect. And let me explain the Lindy effect. That you take a corporation, you take a book, the things have inverse mortality. They don't have a half-life. So in other words, the books have been around for 500 years, odds are it's going to be around for 500 more years. Technologies have been around for 500 years, like the table, odds are will be there for 500 more years. Table will be 2,000 years, another 2,000 years. So life expectancy increases with time for a certain class of things. It's not because there's no technology, but because technology tends to be fragile, replaced by newer technology. So when I write, everybody wants to sell books in the future. And I remember my first publisher started complaining that I was using too many classical references. They said, we gotta be modern. And of course, publishers are typically wrong. Not here, in the US, okay? And of course, they don't understand their own business very well. But, so they wanted me to modernize my books. I told them, no, you idiots, you don't understand how it works. When I write, I make sure that whatever I'm writing about is interesting to people who are alive now. And then I flow back in the past and make sure it would have been also interesting to people 30 years ago. So if it interests people today and would have interested people 30 years ago, odds are it's going to interest people 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now. And effectively, the Food by Randomness, what year are we, 2025? It was, yeah, Food by Randomness is almost 25 years old. Okay? So the trick works. So this is how, so I don't write projecting the future, I just write using robust elements from the past that have not been killed by newer ideas. So this is hence the references are to classic. The ideas are embedded in the classical framework. Unfortunately, I am Mediterranean, so my culture is more Western in the sense that I count the Arabs as part of the West, not Asian in the sense of India and China. So, but I go back to classics, Arabic, Semitic, Talmudic, Roman and Greek, that's how it's embedded in. But it's written in a modern language that someone alive today can understand perfectly. And that's how you ensure survival. It's exactly the opposite of the instinct to look more modern. No.
Yes. Don't be so shy, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, the next question from us.
Yes.
What should one do in one's portfolio to protect oneself from risks?
Okay, so the first problem that people fail to understand about risks is that if you use a conventional risk model based on mediocristan, and if you want to have medium or low risk in your life, you would have medium or low risk securities in your portfolio. That's the instinct. And my point is no. The problem is if you on average want a portfolio with low risk, you should not have medium risk instruments for reasons I mentioned before. These companies that seem to be stable are more likely to fall apart because these are prone to what I would call black swan problems. The most efficient way and the most robust way is to concentrate your portfolio on close to zero risk securities for the most part, combined with a portion of maximally risky securities. On average, you have medium risk, but your portfolio cannot go to zero if you have, zero risk security depending on your perspective. If you're based in the US, you can assume that treasury bonds from the US, inflation adjusted, are zero risk. So you build a portfolio mostly in these, and a portion in very high risk. On average, you have a medium risk. It's counter to the recommendation, you learn in business schools, of course not synergy, the bad business schools like Harvard and all these things, right? All these universities. That where you learn the models that don't work in reality, written by professors who have never traded, okay, who have no idea how risk works, and they think that risk is taking standard deviation from the past. So that makes you immune to that. But the same strategy, I call that the barbell strategy, instead of being in the middle, is a combination of very high risk and very low risk that you can do in real life. And you can notice, and I mentioned in Antifragile that this is present in the biological domain. So what is the highest strategy for female birds? You know that they are monogamous birds, is to have an accountant as a mate, because it's steady income. I'm talking a bird who has the behavior of an accountant, right? Boring, but steady. Boring, not attractive, but steady. And cheat was a rock star once in a while. So you improve your genetic makeup while at the same time having security. So a 90% accountant, 10% rock star. Okay, it's better than having something in the middle, all right? And that's how effectively it's done in nature. And I heard maybe sometimes also done in Moscow, but I'm not sure, all right? So so that's the idea. The optimal strategy is not to have a medium risk job, it's to have a no risk job combined with a very high risk job at the same time. So that bimodal approach is vastly more robust. But let me make a recommendation. If your job is not in the market, if you make your income as a dentist, try not to make money from the market. Because the biggest mistake is people wanted to make money in areas where they end up being fooled, by reality. The thing is, if you're a dentist, you know teeth so well. So what makes you think that you're going to understand dynamics of markets? But there's a bias. They think that because they are smart as dentists, they're going to be very smart as investors. And typically they become what we call the turkey. Someone's going to take advantage of you. So if you make your money as a baker, as a dentist, and so on, try to focus on preservation and try to make your money in your own profession rather than make your money from the market because it's too easy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next question. Why do you admire TT State's model?
And the steady state
for
model.
example.
Okay, so let me explain the notion of scale when we come back to fragility and anti-fragility. You don't have elephants in Russia, no? No? You don't have elephants? Okay, you don't have. Okay. But you have mice. Okay, you have mice, all right. So imagine a mouse and an elephant. Biologically, they appear to be the same, no? They actually look alike, no? Sorry? Kind of. Okay, I mean, but the difference is weight. Is that one is 5 tons and the other one a few grams, correct? Okay. Now, an elephant is metabolically vastly more efficient than a mouse. A mouse has 250 heartbeats a minute, the Tuscan shrew. The other one has 50. Okay? What is the main difference? If you throw a mouse out the window, I'm not saying you should do it. Please don't get me in trouble. I'm not recommending it. I'm saying this is a thought experiment. When the mouse won't care. Nothing will happen to it. But an elephant falling from here, from the stage, not even the stage that high, 1 meter, what would happen? Breaks a leg, kaput, no more elephant. Okay? No more elephant. So what happened is that much more fragile size brings fragility. So, are you going to ask me what my next book is about? Yes, right, very good. Because my next book is about the scale. So people don't understand the scale. Scale makes things fragile. An elephant is much more fragile than a mouse. And actually, people don't quite get it, because if you see these books, you have Godzilla, you have tall humans. If a human were to be tall, it would have different shape. It would have to have much, much larger feet. Because scaling would happen for robustness. Like an elephant doesn't have the thin feet that humans or mice have. So there are differences in scale. Why? Because it's more fragile, and even then it's not enough to guarantee the survival of it. By the way, there are not that many elephants left, maybe 50,000, I don't know, something like that. And mice, I'm sure you have more mice in Moscow. We have more mice in New York than taxpayers. Okay, that gives you an idea. I mean, if you don't have, maybe because people run away from taxes, but it could be because they have a lot of mice in New York. So that tells you that mice are, so you survive better when you're small. Now, when it comes to countries, do the same analysis and look at Hong Kong versus China. You see how much more dynamic Hong Kong is versus China? Singapore versus China. You take a place and you take their environment and ethnicity and culture and language, and you notice that the city-state does better than the big state next door. And the same thing applies to Dubai. It's the smallest Arab state, if you look at it as an emirate, and it's the most successful one. But if you look at this, the city-state model is very robust. And in the past, for example, look at Venice. The Phoenicians didn't have an empire, they had city-states. It's a very robust model, and typically the scale of the city is very important. And of course, it can't be too big. So there are things about scaling that people ignore when looking at systems. Okay? For example, communism failed in Russia, but it didn't fail in kibbutz. Why? Because when you go from Soviet or several hundred million people versus 300, see, things may work for 300 people, but not 300 million. So that's the notion of scale. And there are a lot of things that flow from it as far as fragility, growth, but historically, if you look at city-states, I mean, it's very convincing. Whenever you just do the thing, Venice better than north of Italy, okay? Lombardia or Piedmont. You take Genoa, better than Tuscany next door, okay? And Liguria. So you take Alexandria, it was a very well-functioning city-state. And of course, later on, it got absorbed into Egypt, and look, it fell apart. Had they kept Alexandria the way China is smart enough to keep Hong Kong, sort of isolated, it would have done a lot better. And Dubai is definitely the most prosperous, best function. I mean, look at we're in Dubai. We're not elsewhere. We're not in southwestern Nigeria. We're in Dubai for a reason. Okay, and that success comes from the notion of that city-state. So Switzerland is very successful because it's modeled bottom up, not even city-state, canton-state, canton up, canton being the smallest functioning unit, and the government starts from the canton up to the state rather than the reverse. And US, by the way, is not a republic, it's a federation, but it's a real federation, okay? And New York is probably some kind of city-state.